The reception hall glowed with hundreds of fairy lights strung across the vaulted ceiling, casting soft amber light on the polished dance floor. My mother's heavy perfume, that same cloying floral scent she'd worn my entire life, made it impossible to breathe deeply when she stood nearby. She'd positioned herself prominently at the head table despite my seating chart placing her elsewhere, her rehearsed smile fixed as she watched the reception unfold like a director unhappy with her actors' performances. My sister Taylor had been circulating through the reception for the past hour, showing every guest the stack of cash cards she'd already collected from the gift table. $300 just from my coworkers, she'd announced to our cousin Rachel near the appetizer station. And my friends from book club gave me $500. People are so generous. I'd said nothing. I'd learned by age 12 that responding only encouraged their performances. James, my husband of 4 hours, held me close as we swayed to our first dance song. His family surrounded the dance floor, smiling and taking photos with their phones. His uncle Philip stood at the edge of the crowd, distinguished in his navy suit, his silver hair catching the light. At 65, Philip carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from 40 years as a successful investment banker. The song ended to applause and James and I made our way back toward our table for champagne. Philip intercepted us halfway, his warm smile genuine. "James, Rebecca," he said, embracing us both. "Beautiful ceremony. Just beautiful." He paused, his expression turning curious. "I've been meaning to ask, how much did the family wedding gift fund total up to? I know Michael and I contributed our share, but with the whole family pitching in, it must be quite substantial." The words landed like a champagne cork popping in a silent room. Family wedding gift fund. The whole family pitching in. Quite substantial. Taylor's hand froze mid-gesture, her stack of cash cards suddenly forgotten. Her mouth opened slightly. The bridesmaid she'd been talking to looked over at our conversation with interest. My parents exchanged panicked looks from their seats at the head table. My father's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. My mother's burgundy lipstick, too dark for her complexion, suddenly looked garish against her paling face. "What fund?" my mother whispered, but in the momentary quiet between songs, her voice carried clearly across our section. I took a calm sip of my champagne. The bubbles felt crisp and celebratory on my tongue. James's hand found the small of my back, steady and reassuring. Philip looked genuinely confused by the question. "The wedding gift fund that James's family organized. Didn't Rebecca tell you? We've been collecting contributions for months." Months. They'd been planning this for months. Organizing. Contributing. Building something substantial while my family had been. What? Expecting me to be grateful for their presence? "No," my mother said, her voice tight and strained. "Rebecca didn't mention any family fund." "Well, it was meant to be a surprise," Philip said, smiling at me warmly. "James's grandmother started it, actually. She suggested that instead of everyone giving separate gifts, the family could pool resources and give something truly meaningful. Help you two start your life together properly." James's grandmother. 87-year-old Margaret, who'd pulled me aside at Easter dinner and asked what James and I really needed. Not what we wanted, not what would be nice to have. What we actually needed to build the life we envisioned. I'd been honest with her. We needed financial stability. A buffer. Money for the inevitable surprises that came with starting a marriage. Maybe funds for a future down payment or to pay off my student loans, or to invest in our careers. She'd listened without interrupting. Then she'd simply nodded and said, "Leave it to me." "The fund collected quite a bit," Philip continued, pulling out his phone. "Let me see. Michael and I contributed $5,000. James's parents put in 10. Grandmother Margaret added 15 herself. James's aunt and uncle in Boston sent 8. His cousins pooled together for another 4. And then there were smaller contributions from extended family. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 8,000, 4,000. The numbers kept coming, each one another brick in a wall my parents couldn't scale. Taylor made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Her cash cards, which she'd been treating like lottery winnings, probably totaled maybe $2,000. The number Philip was describing made her collection look like tip money. "Altogether," Philip said, looking at his phone screen, "the family fund came to $42,000. We had it transferred directly to your joint savings account last week." Clean wire transfer, fully documented for tax purposes. $42,000. Joint savings account. Last week. Already transferred. The reception hall seemed to tilt slightly. I saw my father's face go pale. My mother's champagne glass trembled in her hand. Taylor's cash card slipped slightly from her grasp, fanning across the table. 42,000, my father repeated, his voice hollow. Give or take, Philip said cheerfully. Some family members are still planning to send additional contributions. Grandmother Margaret mentioned something about wanting to round it up to 50,000. She's quite determined once she sets her mind to something. Round it up to 50,000. As if 42,000 wasn't already more money than my parents had ever given me for anything in my entire life. My mother found her voice, though it came out strangled. Philip, that's an extraordinarily generous family gift. Surely something of this magnitude should have been discussed with Rebecca's family? Why? James asked, his voice pleasant but firm. It's a gift from my family to my wife and me. What's there to discuss? The logic was unassailable. The message was clear. His family didn't need permission. Didn't need approval. Didn't need to coordinate with people who'd never organized anything comparable. I mean, my mother said, scrambling, it just seems like the kind of thing families should coordinate on. So there's no duplication of effort. So everyone knows what everyone else is giving. Did you coordinate your gift with us? Philip asked, his tone still friendly but with an edge of curiosity. I'd hate for there to be any duplication. The silence that followed was deafening. Because my parents hadn't given us a gift. Not really. They'd paid for the rehearsal dinner. Barely, after negotiating the restaurant down to the cheapest possible menu. $3,000 maximum for 40 people eating chicken marsala and house wine. $3,000. 1/14 of what James's family had collectively given us. Taylor tried to redirect. Well, I gave Rebecca a very thoughtful gift. The KitchenAid mixer she wanted. That was $300. That's lovely, Philip said genuinely. I'm sure she'll use it often. Kitchen equipment is always practical. Practical. The word hung there. Because while a mixer was practical, $42,000 in savings was life-changing. It was the difference between struggling and thriving. Between stress and security. Between maybe and absolutely. The family was very excited to contribute, Philip continued, oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tension. Grandmother Margaret sent out an email to everyone explaining that Rebecca was joining the family, and the Mitchells take care of their own. That's always been our tradition. The Mitchells take care of their own. The phrase landed like a weighted blanket. Warm for those included. Suffocating for those excluded. I'd learned something important during my 5 years with James. I'd learned what it looked like when a family operated as a genuine unit. When family members viewed each other's success as communal celebration rather than individual competition. When helping someone wasn't about control or leverage but about genuine care. James's grandmother had asked me once, about 2 years into my relationship with James, why I seemed surprised when family members asked about my work. Not to judge or compare, but with authentic interest in my career as a graphic designer, my freelance projects, my creative ambitions. I'd brushed it off, but she'd pressed gently. Over tea that afternoon at her house, I'd told her about growing up invisible. The daughter who earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs and therefore needed nothing. The one whose achievements were minimized while Taylor's mediocrity was celebrated as finding her unique path. Grandmother Margaret had listened without interrupting. When I finished, she'd simply said, "That sounds like you spent a lot of years feeling very alone." No one in my family had ever acknowledged my loneliness. They'd rewritten history so completely that they genuinely believed they'd treated both daughters equally. 3 months after that conversation, James had casually mentioned to his family that we were engaged and thinking about wedding planning. Within a week, Grandmother Margaret had emailed the entire Mitchell family with a proposal. Instead of traditional individual gifts, they'd create a family fund to give us a real foundation. The response had been immediate and enthusiastic. Every family member wanted to contribute. Some sent money right away. Others set up monthly transfers. James's parents had offered to match whatever the extended family raised. By last week, the fund had reached $42,000. All deposited into our account. All legally documented. All protected from any claims or manipulations. Rebecca, Philip said, turning to me directly. Grandmother Margaret wanted me to tell you specifically that the money is yours to use however you need. No strings. No requirements. Whether it's student loans, a house down payment, investing in your design business, whatever helps you to build the life you want. No strings. No requirements. Whatever you need. The words were so foreign to my experience that they almost didn't compute. In my family, every dollar came with expectations. Every gift came with leverage. Every bit of help came with the implicit understanding that you now owed something in return. My father tried a different approach. That's very generous, Philip, but with that kind of money comes responsibility. Rebecca James, you'll need proper financial planning. Tax strategies. I know an accountant who already handled, James said smoothly. Our family accountant structured everything properly. The contributions were documented as gifts under the annual exclusion limits. No tax implications for anyone. Family accountant. Annual exclusion limits. No tax implications. James's family had thought of everything. Protected every angle. Made it bulletproof. My mother's mask cracked visibly. This just seems excessive. $42,000? For a wedding gift? What message does that send to young couples? That they should expect handouts instead of working for things themselves. Are you suggesting my family shouldn't have been generous to your daughter? Philip asked, his tone still pleasant but with unmistakable steel underneath. The question hung there, unanswerable without revealing her true objection. That someone else had given me something substantial. That someone else had valued me enough to pool $42,000. That someone else's family had done what she never had. Provided real, meaningful, actionable support. Taylor stood abruptly, her cash cards scattering across the table. I need air. She grabbed her purse and headed toward the exit. Her fiancé Brandon followed, looking uncomfortable and confused. Through the windows I could see her pacing in the parking lot, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling her friend Michelle, complaining about how unfair it was that I'd married into money. How I always got everything. How I didn't deserve it. The band started playing again and guests returned to dancing and conversation. But at our table the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. My parents sat frozen, their decades-long narrative crumbling in front of 200 witnesses. You know, Philip said, pulling up something else on his phone. Grandmother Margaret also mentioned she's already planning your first anniversary gift. She's quite taken with you, Rebecca. She told me you're the first person James has ever brought home who asked her about her life instead of just trying to impress her. First anniversary gift. Already planning. Quite taken with you. Each phrase was evidence of ongoing inclusion, continued support, a relationship that extended far beyond a single occasion. Margaret is wonderful, I said, my voice steady and genuine. I love our Sunday afternoon teas together. Sunday afternoon teas? My mother repeated faintly. You have tea with James's grandmother every Sunday? Most Sundays, I confirmed. She tells me stories about the family history. We're working on organizing her photo albums together. The implication was clear. I had a relationship with James's grandmother that was closer than anything I'd ever had with my own mother. Weekly visits. Shared projects. Genuine connection. My father stood abruptly. We should circulate. Thank some guest. It's getting late. It was barely 9 o'clock. No one was leaving. He was fleeing, unable to sit at a table where his daughter's value had been quantified by someone else's family at $42,000 and counting. My parents didn't say goodbye directly. Just vague excuses and manufactured smiles before disappearing into the crowd. Taylor and Brandon left shortly after, her final glance toward our table unmistakable. She was looking at us one more time, trying to reconcile the story she told herself about being the special daughter with the reality that someone else's family had invested more in my future in 6 months than our parents had in 29 years. James and I danced until midnight, surrounded by the Mitchell family who'd pooled their resources to give us a foundation. Grandmother Margaret held court at her table, accepting thanks from various family members for organizing the fund. James's parents circulated, introducing me to relatives I hadn't yet met, all of whom mentioned their contribution to the fund with genuine pride. Your family seems surprised, James said as we slow danced near the end of the reception. Shocked is more accurate, I replied. They didn't know I'd become someone worth investing in. You've always been worth investing in, he said firmly. They just never bothered to notice. When we left for our honeymoon 2 days later, the $42,000 sat securely in our joint account. We'd already met with the financial advisor grandmother Margaret had recommended. Half would go toward my student loans, a quarter toward starting an investment portfolio, the remaining quarter toward our emergency fund and my graphic design business expansion. Every dollar had a purpose. Every contribution had been given freely. Every family member had participated in building our foundation without asking for anything in return. My mother called 3 days after the wedding. That was quite a surprise at the reception. The family fund. It was generous, I said neutrally. $42,000 is more than generous. It's extraordinary. Yes, I agreed. The Mitchells are an extraordinary family. The distinction was deliberate. The Mitchells. Not James's family as if they were separate from me. The Mitchells. My family now. The family that had claimed me, invested in me, built me into their collective wealth and support system. We would have contributed if we'd known, my mother said, the lie transparent even over the phone. Would you? I asked quietly. Silence. Because we both knew the answer. We see my parents occasionally now. Brief, uncomfortable visits where they try to pretend they're not calculating the cost of our furniture, our electronics, the evidence of the life we're building with Mitchell family support. Where they don't ask about our finances because they're terrified of the answers. Taylor sends passive-aggressive texts sometimes. Comments about how nice it must be to marry into wealth. How lucky I am. Never acknowledging that luck had nothing to do with it. That I'd built a relationship with someone whose family valued contribution over competition. That I'd found people who believed investing in each other was how families operated. The wedding photos hang in our home office. There's one the photographer captured perfectly. Philip announcing the fund total, my parents' faces frozen in shock, Taylor's cash cards scattered across the table, and me, champagne glass raised, finally valued at $42,000 and counting. Not by my birth family. But by the family I chose. The family that chose me back. The family that takes care of its own.